Let's talk about world building, an essential part of all fiction writing. Now, when you think of world building, your mind probably jumps to the fantasy or sci-fi genres, where writers must create a whole new world with unique politics, geographies, and even languages. But world building is a vital skill that all fiction writers should master. With that in mind, we'll discuss the basic elements of fictional world building. Side note, this is a two-part series. In this video, I'll talk about 5 elements of world building: religion, philosophies, magic, politics, and conflict. In part 2, John will present 5 more world building elements, but I'll let him tell you about those. For now, let's start with religion and philosophies. Much like in the real world, religion shapes many of the events that take place in a fictional world. Likewise, different philosophies will motivate the characters' choices, actions, and lifestyles. When creating fictional religions and philosophies, an author often uses real-world inspiration. They may look to real religions and philosophies as a jumping-off point, adding myths or traditions, or combining the characteristics of 2 existing philosophies. Most fantasy and sci-fi stories feature unique religions and philosophies, like the faith of the Seven in Game of Thrones and the Vulcan philosophy of pure logic in Star Trek. Let's take a look at a specific example from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Unlike pretty much any other Star Trek that came before or after, DS9 tackles religion in all its complicated facets. The Bajoran way of the prophets is both a source of comfort and spirituality for devout followers and a center of power and corruption for the story's antagonists. The Bajoran religion drives conflict in the series as the protagonist, Benjamin Sisko, is reluctantly named emissary of the prophets. He struggles with his role as a religious leader, mostly because it is a religion he doesn't follow. As the series progresses, the prophets, a group of disembodied wormhole aliens, push Sisko to do their bidding. Ultimately, the captain must accept that his fate is not his own. He is merely the pawn of a group of careless gods who may or may not have his best interests in mind. All right, let's move on to magic. In fiction, magic is separated into 2 groups. You have hard magic and soft magic. How you want to use magic in your story will determine which of these 2 systems you'll use. Let's break down the difference between the 2. So you might be asking yourself, what is hard magic? In a hard magic system, the author will define the rules and limitations of magic. The characters need skill or will have to learn how to use magic. They may have to gather materials to cast a spell or need tools like wands or incantations. Magic in these stories can't do everything, and magical users will have varying degrees of talent. You usually find hard magic systems in stories where the protagonist has a magical ability. If a hero has a limitless magical ability, they can use it to solve any conflict they encounter, which will obviously make for a boring story. That's not to say a character can't use magic to solve a problem, but there should be some challenge in how they use magic. Magic should be a tool that requires skill and creative thinking to use. The Harry Potter series is an example of a hard magic system where the characters must go to school, learn spells, and master various skills to use magic properly. So now let's talk about soft magic. What is it? Soft magic has no defined rules or limitations. In a world with soft magic systems, magic users can do whatever the plot needs them to do with their magic. There is no explanation of how they use magic, where their power comes from, or the limits to their ability. So, when is a good time to use a soft magic system? When magic creates a conflict that your protagonist must overcome, magic should create obstacles for your character. This is often seen as a magical antagonist, like Sauron in The Lord of the Rings, or any enemy whose power seems overwhelming and limitless. It's also worth mentioning that in science fiction, magic is often replaced with technology. The same rules apply here. An enemy will have advanced and unstoppable technology, whereas our hero's tech may be janky, busted, and prone to breakdowns.
Watch this. I think we're in trouble.
Moving on to politics. Before writing your epic fantasy, you need to know your world's political systems. You'll also need to know how politics create conflict and what trouble they'll create for your hero. With so many real-world examples, political systems are not hard to recreate. In many ways, the political landscape of a fictional world is just as important as the harsh mountainous terrain or the magical creatures that inhabit it. After all, the politics of a world dictate how its citizens interact with one another and with the land they live on. When creating a new world, it is important to consider the various political factions that might exist and how they might conflict with one another. For example, will there be a monarchy or a democracy? That's up to you to decide. Will different regions have different forms of government? How will the different parties coexist? By answering these questions, an author can create a richer and more believable world for the readers to explore. If you'd like to learn more about some real-world political systems you can use in your next fictional world, we did an entire video on that, which is linked in the comments below. On to conflict. One of the most important elements of world building is to create a history of conflict. Wars provide an excellent opportunity to do this. They can help to establish the political landscape of a world, as well as the relationships between different cultures and races. In addition, wars can introduce new technologies and ideas, giving the world an added layer of depth and realism. Of course, not every story needs to center around a war, but incorporating some element of conflict into the history of your world is essential for making it feel believable and alive. And major conflicts can happen outside of the politics of a fictional world. Obviously, governments will clash over borders and resources, but differing ideas and philosophies have caused splits in the world's largest religion. Real-world examples of this include the Sunni-Shia divide and the Protestant Reformation. Each event caused a schism in two of the world's largest religions, Islam and Christianity. To be clear, we're not talking about conflicts between individual characters. We're talking about larger conflicts that happen when different factions collide. How do these conflicts shape your world and affect your plot? That is all that I have for today. But don't forget to check out part 2 of this video for 5 more world building elements. It says to sign off however I want, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it informational, please like it and subscribe, and be sure to come back for more helpful tips. All right, have a good day. Oh, that's stupid. Okay. Please be sure to give us a like and subscribe, and we will talk soon. All right, bye. Have a good night.